Hey guys, welcome back to another tipping video on the channel. Today I'll be going through my round 19 predictions and tips, but quickly, first we'll go through what occurred in round 18. Starting off with the first game, it was Sydney versus Western Bulldogs on the final Thursday night clash of the season, and it was the Swatties getting the job done in a 50-50 one that I did correctly tip, so a good start to the round. I'll definitely take that, but then arguably one of my worst and probably most annoying tips of the season so far. Melbourne versus Brisbane. I tipped Brisbane, and Melbourne remarkably had one of the comebacks of the season and won the game in the end by a point. And I tipped Brisbane, and I was very, very pissed off that the fact that they choked that one. So yeah, so a fairly interesting way to start the round, that's for sure. And then we had the Saturday games. Obviously, it was Collingwood getting the job done against Freo. Obviously, it's the first Collingwood v Freo game I've watched in quite some time, so I was very happy with the result there. Gold Coast beat the Saints, which I correctly tipped in a bit of a 50-50 one, so I'll definitely take that. And then I kind of didn't do so well from this point on in the video. I tipped Port Adelaide, and Carlton had one of the upsets of the season. I know people were backing in the Blues for this one. I obviously didn't, but I still, like my big call coming up soon, you'll clearly see that I had faith in the Blues to be good in this one. And unfortunately, Port didn't show up for me, so I got that one wrong. We all know what happened on a very, very interesting Saturday night. Geelong absolutely thrashed the Bombers, so I'll definitely take that tip. And the Crows fell short to the Giants at home, which was a very, very interesting loss, and one that will definitely shape up the rest of the final series. Obviously, I tipped Adelaide, and GWS won that one. And then we got the slacky Sunday, like I like to call it, because it was just really, really bad, I guess. North Melbourne versus Hawthorn. Went Hawthorn, so you take it. And obviously getting the Richmond one correct with West Coast struggles at the moment. So yeah, that was a bit of a interesting round, I guess. 6 out of 9 for me. Look, I'll take it. Nothing amazing, but I'll definitely take it. Now I'll go through my big calls. So I started off not too well, and I didn't end off too well either. I did pretty well on the Saturday. I first went with Sydney kicking the first 3 goals of the game against the Dogs, and we all know what happened. The Dogs had a flying start. I believe they kicked 6 goals in the first quarter, and I think they kicked the first 2 of the game. So, yeah, got that one wrong. And in Melbourne versus Brisbane, I predicted Melbourne to score 70 points or less, and they scored over 100. So that was a pretty bad big call to go with. Obviously, I'd take this one, and probably wasn't really a big call. We all knew is it going to happen. Ali had to kick 4 or more goals, and he did kick the 4, so I'll definitely take that. And then in the Gold Coast versus Saints game, I predicted the lead to never go beyond 18 points, and I believe Gold Coast were up by 31 points as the highest lead of the game in that one, so I got that one incorrect. And then Carlton versus Port, I predicted Carlton to be leading for 50% or more of the match, but lose. I kind of got it correct because I said Carlton to lead for 50% or more of the match, and they did, so you take it. And then Geelong versus Essendon, I said there are 10 or more lead changes, and there was only 1. I reckon that's probably my worst one of the round and almost of the season. That was absolutely horrible. I said there'd be 10 or more lead changes, and Geelong weren't even down for that whole game. So it was pretty bad. Also, to continue on the pretty bad big calls, I also went Walker and Rankin to combine for 7 or more goals. I believe they combined for 2. Rankin didn't kick any. Tex kicked 2. And then the slack Sunday, it was horrible to watch. Larky and Lewis to combine for 7 or more goals for the Hawthorn v North game. And I don't know exactly what they combined for, but I can tell you now they did not combine for 7. And in Richmond versus West Coast, I predicted West Coast to go goalless in any quarter. And I believe they kicked a goal in every quarter. The first quarter had their lowest score in 7 points. So 2 out of 9 for my big calls. Not great, obviously, but I've had worse weeks, that's for sure. But yeah, let's get straight into round 19. Starting off with a big clash on Friday. They've removed the Thursday night games like I mentioned earlier. It's a huge game on Friday night. Western Bulldogs taking on the Bombers. Now, both teams have been, I guess pretty bad against the other top 8 teams, but they're both currently in the top 8, and their form recently has been a bit 50-50. The Dogs have been alright, I guess, though they did drop a game that they probably should have won against Sydney. I do think they were probably the better side for majority of the game. Sydney had their ruck omitted and Tom Hickey, so they didn't actually have a recognised ruckman in the ruck. So Tim English won 60 hitouts, and they still lost the game. Bonampally was good. Their midfield was pretty good. They scored 6 goals in the first quarter to Sydney's 2, I believe. So they were a very, very good side in the game, the Dogs. But yeah, it was just really, really bad for them. And Essendon, obviously, we all know what happened to them against Geelong. That was an absolute shocking performance, only scoring 45. I believe it's their lowest score of the season. Yeah, their forward line just did not work, and every single time they turned the footy over, Geelong just scored off it. And yeah, it should make a very, very interesting game because it is at Marvel. I do think it'll be close for both teams. It's a big 50-50 one, but I reckon I'm going to take a punt and go with Essendon by 6 points. My big call, the lead never goes beyond 25 points. I reckon it'll be close for the whole night. And then moving on to the Saturday games, we've got the 5, obviously. The first being Richmond versus Hawthorn at the G. Now, Hawthorn obviously got a pretty good win over North. Nothing too special, though. Most people would have been expecting them to win that game, and probably should have won it by more if it wasn't for inaccurate goal kicking. Obviously, James Sicily coming back into their defence meant that their defence looked a lot better on paper, and it performed a lot stronger. And they kept North to 4 goals in the half, and quite a low score, which was quite good for Hawthorn. They certainly needed that win, and now they've got the 5 wins for the season. So at the moment they're just chugging along, and you never know, they could pinch an upset here against the Tigers. The Tigers, they didn't do anything special either. They just had to get the 4 points against West Coast, and they obviously weren't going to lose, and were in control for most of the match. Most of their players stood up in the big moments as well, and you'd feel Richmond would have definitely taken that. I do think it'll be close, this one. I do see Hawthorn challenging the Tigers, but I still got to go Richmond. I'm not brave enough to go Hawthorn here. I've just seen a little bit more from Richmond recently. I'll go them by 13 points, and my big call, Tigers are up by 30 or more points at any point in the match. And moving on to Carlton versus West Coast, also on that Saturday. Now, I'm not too sure if too many people will be, tuning into this one, unless, of course, you go for Carlton and West Coast. This is going to be a pretty big blowout because Carlton are in some great form, one of the informed teams of the comp. They've won their last 4. Their forward line looks dangerous. Their midfield's getting their hands on it, and overall is performing quite strongly, I guess. And their defence, Jacob Wiedering is just dominating their defence at the moment. So, they're playing some pretty good footy, the Blues. And at the moment, they're definitely surging up the ladder and probably should make the top 8. Now, West Coast, obviously, a month ago they had that horrible loss to Sydney. But, ever since, they haven't been that bad. But they've just struggled to really find consistency over 4 quarters, and they're quite a young side. They will run out of energy, and it definitely looked like they ran out of energy later on in that game. They also had a few injury concerns. I think Barras and McGovern were off for most of the first half with concussion tests. Oscar Allen had a bit of a scare with his shoulder. I believe Jinby actually got subbed out with a hamstring injury. I think at one point Bailey Williams was in a concussion test as well. I think Jack Williams got sore. It was just ridiculous how much injuries they actually had. I'm probably forgetting a few players as well, but I think I've covered most of their injuries for the game. And yeah, look, they weren't too good. I mean, they're West Coast. They haven't been good all season, and they're not too good away as well. They're a lot better at home, the West Coast. But because this one is away, you feel you got to go Carlton, and Carlton big. I reckon by 86 points. And my big call, Charlie Curnow kicks 5 or more goals. We all know what he did to them last time they met, so I'm expecting something similar. And then we got Brisbane versus Geelong. It should be an interesting one again, this one. Brisbane obviously choked one of the games of the season. Like, it was just unbelievable how they choked that. They were 4 goals up with 7 minutes to go, but somehow found a way to choke it in the end. Majority of their players played well, and I thought they were probably the better side for majority of the game. Then again, the MCG hoodoo comes into place, and you feel that Brisbane maybe can't win at the MCG anymore. Though this one is at the Gabba, and you'd expect them to be quite comfortable there, and comfortable favourites. Geelong, that they look back to their best. Chris Scott pointing out that they're the danger, and they're leaving some stars out of their side every week. Like, they bring some stars back in and they drop some, and then they do the same week in, week out, and it gets very, very interesting for Geelong. And at the moment, their forward line is playing really, really well. The last couple of weeks against North and Essendon, respectively, they put up 2 big scores of over 120 plus. And this is without Hawkins and Cameron firing. Like, Hawkins was obviously good last week with the 5 goals, and Jeremy Cameron, he's just so out of form. I don't know what's happened to Jezza, but he's got to pick up his pace if Geelong want to go deep into finals. Though at the moment they're playing like a top 4 side, the Cats. I do think Brisbane, though, you got to go Brisbane at the Gabba by 27 points. And my big call, Lachie Neale, has 115 plus fantasy points. He could get tagged, but I'm just going to go with that, and hopefully he doesn't get tagged. And then Freo versus Sydney is another 50-50 game, and another pretty big game on the Saturday night. Both teams have been pretty poor this season when making finals last season and being a top 5 side. Both of these teams last season, now towards the bottom 5, really. Sydney got the must win against the Dogs last Thursday night. They were pretty good. Tom Papley came in with the clutch. He kicked 4 goals, I believe, and kicked the match winner as well. And, that they were definitely looking for a player to spark them with a big win, the Swans, and Tom Papley certainly was that player. Now, Freo have been struggling recently, and they've had a very, very inconsistent season. And, away from home, they just looked like they didn't show too much. And in that second quarter, they got absolutely obliterated by the Pies, and they've got to bounce back from that performance. And at home, you do feel like Freo will challenge. And plus, Sydney aren't too good away. Then again, they're not too good at home, Sydney. They're very, very inconsistent. But I feel like Sydney have probably shown more this season and probably deserve my tip. I'm not saying who I think will win. I'm just basically saying who I think deserves the tip, because I think it's such a 50-50 game, this one, that I could see it going maybe to a draw or something like that. I'm going to go Sydney, though, by 11 points. But my big call, Michael Walters kicks 3 or more goals. Whenever Freo play well, he plays well. He didn't play so well last week. I think he had his first ever miss this season from a set shot as well. And then we got a huge blockbuster on the Saturday night. Pretty much what I'm saying is the grand final preview. Collingwood versus Port over at the Adelaide Oval. Going to be a huge game. Now, Port obviously are coming off a loss now. Obviously, after their 13 winning streak, they've had a bit of a hoodoo against it. A bit of a bad loss against Carlton. And you'd think it's just a hiccup, but had a lot of players out. Dixon was out injured. Horne-Francis, the same. Rioli was out for a personal reason. Mackenzie was also out injured. And Butters could be out for this game as well, because he got injured in the game. Burn-Jones got concussed in the game against Carlton as well. So it's very, very interesting at the moment. Port got a lot of injuries. Obviously, apart from Dan Houston, you feel that no player was consistent through the game for Port. They had their opportunities to score. I think at one point they actually had more inside forward 50s than Carlton in that second quarter, even though Carlton were up by a good 30 to 40 points. So it just shows you how much you got to convert. And Port just didn't really convert that well in the first half, and Carlton just ran over the top of them in the second half. Now, Collingwood were very, very good again against Freo. They're playing some good, consistent footy, and I guess that's the good thing about us at the moment. We're playing very, very consistent. And Jamie Elliott was very good, kicked the 4 goals. And we're just doing what we're doing. Our defence is absolutely elite at the moment. Number 1 defence in the comp, the Pies. You just feel that it's getting harder and harder week by week for teams to score. And during the winter months, Craig McRae's talked about getting more aggressive with our game plan and our game style, and looking to hit the scoreboard more. Because this one is at Adelaide Oval, I do see it being close. We all know what happened earlier in the year at the G, and I feel like maybe something not similar, but something like that could have happened if it was at the G. It's a huge blockbuster game. I'm pretty confident in the Pies. I'm going to go us by 14 points, and my big call, both teams score over 80 plus points in one of the games of the round. Now, moving on to the Sunday, we've got GWS versus Gold Coast. Both teams, looking for the spot in the 8. It should be an interesting one at Giants Stadium. The Giants have been the underdogs all season. Adam Kingsley is just such a fantastic coach, incredibly underrated. I had absolutely no idea who he was at the start of the season, and that's why I tipped GWS to come 18th. But like the AFL's come out and said, he's not just building a team, he's building a club at the moment, Adam Kingsley. His players are playing absolutely phenomenally at the moment under him. Toby Greene, he's such a fantastic captain. He's up there with, at the moment, Darcy Moore and, Jordan Dawson with the league's best captains. And, look out for the Giants, because at the moment they're looking like they're going to make finals. They've won their last 5. They're in some dangerous form. And, Gold Coast, they just played better than the Saints. At the moment, the Saints are just turning their games into, I guess, shit shows in a way, and the opposition always seems to just play slightly better than them. And I didn't think Gold Coast were too good. I just thought they were better than St Kilda, and St Kilda got a lot wrong at the moment. And I think most people probably thought they were going to get the win as well under the interim coach Stephen King. This time, though, I do think it'll be a little bit of a challenge for Stephen King's men, because over at Giants Stadium, the Giants are pretty good over there. I reckon they should win this pretty comfortably by 35 points. And my big call, Toby Greene and Jesse Hogan combined for 5 or more goals. Now, also on the Sunday, we've got an interesting game at the MCG. It's Melbourne versus Adelaide. This one should be pretty interesting because Adelaide are in some interesting form. Melbourne are, winning, but they're not playing amazingly. They were pretty good though last week against Brisbane. Looks like they might be starting to find the right forward craft mix. Though every time I say that, or at least believe that, they seem to have a really bad week the following. And, their forward line's playing pretty well at the moment. Jake Malcolm was really, really good. Obviously kicked the match winner. And the fact that they came from 4 goals down against the Lions with 7 minutes to go, it's another top 4 side. It was a very, very, very good performance by the Dees, and one that was led by Max Gawn, that's for sure. He certainly was best of field. And Brodie Grundy left out of the team, pretty harsh, most people thought, but Max Gawn plays better with Grundy out of the ruck, and who knows, maybe Melbourne thought wrong about Grundy, getting Gawn and Grundy to both ruck, because at the moment, Gawn rucking by himself is just clearly the way better option. Also, Christian Petracca, I do think he should stay up forward. I think he kicked another 4 goals or 5. He was very, very, very impressive against Brisbane up forward. He's actually kicking straight as well. When he's in midfield, he doesn't seem to be kicking as straight. He looks pretty confident at the moment, and he's just got to stay forward, in my opinion. Adelaide had a pretty bad loss as well. They'll be looking to bounce back. You feel like Josh Rashilli's actions and what he showed against the Giants probably reflected their game and probably summed up their whole night and maybe even their season. You never know, the Crows. It's going to be very, very difficult for them to make finals now, the Crows. They've got a very, very hard run, and this is just a must-win. I do see him challenging Melbourne, but because it's at the G, you just got to go Melbourne by 16 points. You never know, though. This one could be a blowout. My big call, Christian Petracca kicks 3 or more goals. And then the final game of the round, and probably the least watchable, I feel like most people will probably say, St Kilda versus North. Both teams, let's just be real. This is not great at the moment. Both teams look like they're playing bottom 4 footy. St Kilda are playing just a boring style footy where the only team has to be slightly better and they'll still win by 30 points. And it's just not a good watch for the Saints fans at the moment. You really, really feel for them. This one could be a struggle. And, Ross Lyons come out after the game saying, forget finals. This club at the moment, the players, they're just not playing how they want to be playing and how they should be playing. So it's going to be a big challenge. North had heaps of injuries and they've had a carnage day against the Hawks. They've had a pretty carnage season, really. The positive, though, Clarko returning soon. So, he returned back to the club and It could be resume coaching this week or maybe the following. We don't know yet. But anyways, it's good to see Clarko back. Obviously, Zerha probably out for the season. Wardlaw out injured. It certainly doesn't help their odds. You got to go the Saints though in this one. Pretty safe. I'm not brave enough to go North. I do think it'll be pretty low scoring and close. I'll go St Kilda by 15 points. But my big call, Rooser in front. St Kilda, North Melbourne, are leading at any break in the game. So, I hope you guys enjoyed the predictions video. Stay tuned for next week where I'll be going through my round 20 predictions and also for the Collingwood review after the huge blockbuster game against Port.